Blaming others for a life you hate is not only cowardly, but won't fix your fate. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's case is a case of deception and betrayal and an outright lack of empathy, to be quite honest with you. This case was brought to my attention because a subscriber, one of you gems, actually commented saying that you went to school with this killer. Now, I'm not going to say any names in case they don't want to, be known, but they said that they went to school with him, and thankfully nothing crazy happened back then, but it would be much later that this tragedy would occur. And so I decided to go ahead and cover this case because these victims definitely deserve their story to be told, and it's quite disgusting what happened. And also the mystery around it makes you think that possibly this case could have been different than what the jury and everyone around it thought. I know that's quite confusing, but hopefully by the end it will make a little more sense. By the way, if you enjoy my content like this, I post so much content. I post it every single day in December. If you want to go back and watch that, the Wicked Winter playlist will be linked down below. And if you want to continue seeing me or hearing my content, then please make sure you're subscribed and thumbsing up these videos so I know how much you enjoy them or how much you support them or me, because it means the world. Now let's get back to the story. So the Entwistle family lived in Hopkinton, Massachusetts in 2006, and they were a family of 3. But the father and the husband, Neil, he had grown up in a working class family in England, and he eventually went on to get a master's degree in electrical engineering at the University of York. And that is where he would meet his future wife, Rachel Souza, who was an American studying abroad for 12 months on a rowing scholarship. And this is where they actually met because Neil was the crew that worked with them. She was the more bubbly outgoing, he was the more shy and reserved, and they got along immediately and just fell in love. It was said that he did everything to be her knight in shining armor, and 2 years later, on August 23rd of 2008, they got married. And 2 years after that, they had a baby girl named Lillian. He was working in computing for the British government, and she was working as a teacher for English and drama, but eventually they decided to move back to the United States. Well, Rachel moved back anyway, and Neil moved with her to be around her parents for a while and to have a little change of scenery. And so they moved there, they moved in with Rachel's parents for a while until they could buy their own house. It was early January of 2006 now, and they finally got enough money to move into a 4-bedroom house. They posted pictures on Facebook of all of this. They were so happy. You could just see the happiness radiating off of them in these Facebook photos. There were photos of them with the baby. There was even one of Neil holding her up back in December to put the ornaments on the tree. And Lillian was 9 months old by now. Then it was the weekend of January 21st through the 22nd, and Rachel was throwing a housewarming party. They were going to invite all their family and friends over to show them their new life, their new house, and just kind of all celebrate together. But the Friday before, her mother Priscilla was calling her and could not get an answer from anyone in the Entwistle household. And so she decided to go ahead and head over. She knocked on the door a few times, but nobody answered. Only the dogs were barking. She left, didn't think much of it. She left a note on the door and just thought they would call her back later. But then Rachel's best friend, Joanne, went over just to talk to her, and she found Rachel's mother's note still on the door and couldn't get anyone to answer either. So together they decided it was time to call the Hopkinton police station and report them missing. So at 8:27 p.m. that Saturday, January 21st, the police went over a few of them just to do a quick search through the house. They walked through and they really saw nothing out of the ordinary. The TV was on, there was music playing in the baby's room, but they didn't see anything, and that was including the family. So the family was still missing, and they decided to scour the neighborhood to search for them as well, but they weren't finding anything. So with their family getting more restless, Rachel's stepfather, Joe, actually called in a favor from a friend of his who was a Boston cop. And he said, look, can you just call the police station? Can you make them search the house again? We can't find them anywhere. Can you make them do something? And so Rachel's stepfather's friend called that Hopkinton police station and asked them to do a walkthrough again. And thank God he did, because the minute they walked into that house for the second time, they knew they had missed something, because an overwhelming stench hit them in the face. They followed it into the master bedroom, but they still didn't see anything wrong, just like they hadn't before, until they saw the crumpled up comforter on the bed and thought maybe they should check there. Well, when they did, when they got closer, they noticed that there was a body underneath. And when they moved it completely, they found two. They had both been shot at point-blank range. Lillian through the chest that hit her mother as well, and then her mother had another shot in the head. And the obvious next step was to find the father and husband, Neil. They found that Friday the 20th, he had taken their Suburban to the Boston Logan Airport. They found him in videos from the ATM machines, and he looked quite calm with a slight smile on his face, and he had a very faraway look in his eye. He was having a lot of trouble getting money out of the ATMs and eventually had to get a line of credit. Once he did, he bought a ticket back to London, his home country. But the thing was, the flight didn't leave till the next morning, and instead of making the 30-mile route home, he just slept in the car in the parking lot. At 8:20 the next morning, he headed for his flight, and they saw in the security footage that he showed very little emotion, and he had no luggage besides his passport. Once they realized that the plane that he boarded was going to where his parents lived, they got their phone number. On January 23rd, the day after they found Lillian and Rachel, they called Neil's parents home and got him on the phone. They prepared to very gently tell him what had happened to his family, but were surprised to know that he actually knew more than them. He told the police trooper on the phone that the morning of the murders he had left to run an errand to go shopping at about 9 a.m., and at that point his wife and daughter were still alive and well. When he returned at 11 a.m. though, he found them dead, and he said, "I pulled the covers back, and that's when I saw Lily, and Lily was such a mess. Their whole mouths and nose were covered. It was almost like it was bubbles." Then he was asked if he was the one that pulled the bedsheet over them, and he responded with, "I almost felt like I was closing them off. I don't know why I did it." He didn't call the police at all, and he said he was actually going to kill himself after finding them, but he went downstairs to get a knife from the kitchen, and he just couldn't use it because all he thought about was how much it was going to hurt. So instead of a knife, he decided to get a gun, and he knew that Rachel's father, his father-in-law, had one, a .22 revolver, so he headed over to their house. But when he got there, it was locked, and instead of telling the police, he just went home to his parents' house in England. He was asked if the thought ever crossed his mind to call anyone, and he simply said no. Police kept him on the phone for 2 hours, and the more they spoke to him, the more they were certain he had done it. In fact, he became the prime suspect, and an international arrest warrant was issued. On February 9th, he was traced to London in an underground tunnel at the Royal Oak Station after they searched his parents' house and brought out 2 large bin liners full of stuff. But at this train station, he didn't put up a fight. He went with them. But at first, he did request not to be extradited back to the United States, but eventually he agreed to go. Rachel and Lillian were buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, with Rachel's last name on their single grave. A press conference after Neil's arrest explained, "On Thursday night, the 19th of January, Rachel was alive and had spoken with family members. At some time on Friday morning, Neil Entwistle, with a firearm we believed he secured sometime before that from father-in-law Joseph Matarazzo, shot Rachel in the head and then proceeded to shoot baby Lillian, who was lying on the bed next to her mother. We believe possibly this was intended to be a murder-suicide, but we cannot confirm that. Obviously the murder was affected, but the suicide was not. What we believe happened next was that Neil Entwistle returned the gun to his father-in-law's home in Carver and then made preparations to leave the country. As we know, he was observed at Logan International Airport. He purchased a one-way ticket to British Airways at approximately 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, January 22nd. He was on an 8:15 a.m. flight to the United Kingdom on that day. Based on forensic information late Tuesday afternoon that linked the .22 caliber handgun owner by Joseph Matarazzo both to Neil Entwistle and to Rachel, we believed we had probable cause to seek an arrest warrant for Neil Entwistle's arrest. And he was placed without bail at Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but some of his family members really strongly believed he could not have done this to his family. They said he was a loving dad, a doting husband, and that his wife was super blissful in their marriage, but Neil was the one who wasn't as happy with life, and that is why they actually moved to the United States, because he was getting really down on himself, saying that he would never amount to anything. He was just a coal miner's son. So they moved to the United States for a fresh start, and it seemed to be getting a lot better. Rachel's stepfather would invite him out to their gun club so he could practice with them and just kind of hang out and have someone to be with, and they were just overall getting much better, and he was getting much happier, but he was lying big time to his entire family. You see, Rachel believed they were doing fine financially. He had told her that he was still getting $10,000 a month from his British government job that he had, the intelligence job, and that they were fine, nothing to worry about. He had that money coming in. But in fact, he had nothing. He paid for everyone's meals every time they went out on his credit cards, but he had 8 of them and they were all maxed out. He wasn't getting money from anyone. He was having no luck finding any sort of jobs in the United States, and he was turning to shady internet businesses to make his money. He was selling penis enlargement kits that were a complete scam, but he moved himself, his wife, and his daughter into this expensive home that he knew he couldn't afford. And while they were there, it seemed that the marriage was getting worse, or possibly he was just wanting to find other companionship, because he began going on Adult Friend Finder to seek other sorts of intimacy, and he even posted a profile photo of himself laying out in a backyard completely naked, and that was in his wife's parents' backyard. The caption with that photo said, "I am looking for one-on-one discreet relationships with American ladies." It seemed that this man had 2 faces, but was really good at hiding one. Until now. You see, Neil's DNA was found on Rachel's stepfather's gun, even though he said he'd only used it once a few months prior. And Rachel's DNA was found on the muzzle. And keys to the in-laws' house were found in Neil's car that he left at the airport, even though he said he couldn't get into their house to get the gun to end his own life. But the most incriminating evidence was that when they looked on his computer, they found that days before the murder, he had went on a website where it taught him how to kill people. On March 28th, he was indicted for 2 counts of murder, illegal possession of a firearm, and illegal possession of ammunition. But he pleaded not guilty, and while awaiting trial, the officers found letters that were to his parents and to his lawyers, basically alluding that he was going to commit suicide. And so they moved him to a mental hospital for a while, where he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is basically a developmental delay where they have problems with social interaction, among other things, and find it hard to deal in different situations. But his trial began on June 2nd of 2008 with 45 witnesses being called. The only time Neil showed emotion was when he was shown pictures of his deceased family. The defense said that they believed that Rachel was the one who had done it. She had committed suicide after killing her baby. They said to prove this that Rachel had gunpowder residue on both sides of her hands, whereas the steering wheel that Neil had touched right after supposedly doing this had none. They said he had taken the gun from her to save her from the stigma of suicide. But the jury deliberated for 2 days, and they found a woman in the jury was actually the same size as Rachel, and so they had her tested out how she would do it to herself. And she said she believed that she was too small to actually be able to get at the right angle where she could have done it to not only herself, but also the baby. He was found guilty on June 25th and sentenced to life without parole. And the judge actually imposed 2 life sentences as well as 10 years of probation for the firearms and ammunition charges, and with the condition that he never profit from the sale of his story. But his parents continued to fight for what they believed was their innocent son. In August of that same year, while he was in prison, he supposedly shaved his entire head to show his support for a gang which is inside prison and kind of get their protection. But instead of getting the protection at all, they just said, "It's a nice gesture, but we're still gonna kill you." He was then put in protective custody and then moved to a medium security prison that December. His case was appealed, and they argued that the searches of his house were done without a warrant, and so they should have been suppressed, but it was completely rejected. But his mother still says that the evidence points to Rachel killing their grandchild and then committing suicide. But Rachel's parents, who only ever spoke in court, never to the media, said, "Our dreams of being a parent and grandparent have been shattered by the shameful, selfish act of one person, Neil Entwistle. Suffering does not begin to describe what we have been enduring without our beloved Rachel and Lillian, who gave our lives such purpose and meaning." Neil's parents say that the day he showed up at their house that he was a broken man. He was saying, "Rach is dead, Lily is dead. They've been shot." They said he was bewildered, that he just found his family dead, and that he was shocked and dazed, but there was nothing suspicious about him. They said he was open to police when they interviewed him, and they never for 1 second believed he had done it. They also believed that Rachel had been developing postnatal depression because early that January they had called her just to ask why they hadn't received Lillian's recent photographs, and she put down the phone, and when Neil picked it up to talk to them, he said that she just went to bed weeping about it, and they could tell that there was tension within the household, but they didn't know how bad it had gotten. They believed she could have also been the one to type in how to kill on the computer, because they shared the computer and the password was their dog's name, which they both obviously knew, Sally. But what do you think really happened? There's so much conflicting evidence. I never ever want to blame a victim, and I think that can be so devastating, especially to the family who lost their loved one. I don't know, there is, the gunpowder evidence. There's also the fact that he ran. He didn't call the police. Yes, you can be in shock, but you would think that you would do everything you can to save your family, no matter if you know that they're already passed or not. I feel like, God forbid I ever find anyone in that state, I would immediately try to help them, even if I knew there was nothing I could do, because you love those people. You want to save them, no matter if you can't or not, you still will try. And so that's what just seems odd to me. And even with all the evidence, I guess a little evidence that's for her possibly being suicidal, I just don't know. But I will say that one of my siblings does have a little bit of the Asperger's that he was diagnosed with, and that is something that can change how you react to things. My sister is not very good with situations like that. In fact, when my dad had a heart attack, he passed out a year later, and instead of, helping in that situation, like my mom and I ran to my dad, we picked him up, I was trying to go for the phone, I yelled at her, grab the phone for me, and she just kind of stood there not doing anything. And so obviously everyone deals with things in different ways, and that isn't always every Asperger's person who deals with it the same way, but she definitely has a hard time dealing with situations that aren't normal or that are out of the ordinary or that change her reality in any way, and that's to no fault of her own. but it can change how they react, and it could possibly be why he acted so strangely. But it also could be that he did it, and he was sentenced in that way, and so let's hope that we caught the killer and that there was not some other random outsider that did anything to them. But let's also hope that he's not rotting away in prison for something he didn't do, and that, you know, imagine if your family were to take their own lives and then you be locked away for it. That's just almost a double tragedy. And I don't know, like I said, I never want to victim blame. I never want to, you know, give innocence to someone who's been convicted of something. But I don't know, I'd love to hear your theories on it, and if you have any more information, and if you also knew him in school too. So yeah, the subscriber said she didn't really know him that well. She missed a lot of school, and so she didn't know him that well, but nothing ever really bad happened with him then. It's just crazy that anyone you know could turn out to be like that, no matter if they showed signs of it as a kid or not. I mean, there could be the meanest kids who grow up to be the nicest people, or there could be the nicest kids who grow up to be monsters. So you never know, and that's horrifying. But anyways, please make sure to give this a thumbs up, as well as sharing this story if you want to get it out, get Rachel and Lily's story out so people know what happened, and kind of just give light to their lives even though they were taken too soon. So yeah, don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye. If you sense a shift in someone's behavior, check on them, even if they're just your neighbor.